Ever feel like the resources and advice out there for women are missing something essential? I thought so too, which is why more than 6 years ago, I created She Said, She Said. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan, and after 3 decades in communications and then advocacy and now juggling motherhood and entrepreneurship, trust me, friend, I get it. Making a real impact takes more than just passion. It takes the right mindset, the right skills, the right investments, and the right community. On this show, we dive deep with incredible women from all walks of life who have been there. We uncover the secrets to building influence, navigating tricky relationships, and staying true to ourselves even when it's tough. And let's face it, it often is. I also throw in my own favorite productivity and life hacks, things that have shifted my perspective and might help you too. Wherever you are in your journey, my goal here is to leave you inspired to define success your way and to help you build the confidence you need to tackle your biggest goals. Subscribe today and let's unlock your full potential, your confidence, and your greatest influence. Hey friend, welcome to She Said, She Said podcast. I am really glad you're here. You know, when I was growing up and I was starting to think about my career, there was this great TV show that I loved. It was called Designing Women. Now, if you're old enough, you may remember it. It had a great cast: Jean Smart, Annie Potts, Julia Duffy, Delta Burke, and the late, great Dixie Carter, who played the lead. She played a character named Julia Sugarbaker, and Julia was phenomenal. She owned an interior design firm in the South, and she employed all these amazing ladies. Julia was smart, she was effective, gorgeous, 100% in charge, and she was very, very quick with a turn of phrase. When provoked, her reactions were simply the best. Now, in reality, most of us aren't quick enough in those moments when we're provoked to have that pitch-perfect response. And after all, Dixie Carter did have the benefit of a great script. For most of us, we either react in a way that we'll regret later, either because we are caught flat-footed or because we say something that we should have held back. Since we are deep in the political season, passions on both sides, or maybe I should say all sides, can create conversations that turn heated on a dime. And I think most of us really struggle with this at some moments. So I wanted to share a few thoughts on some effective ways that I have found to think about our triggers and our passion points and the emotions that ride alongside them, and how those things can support or detract from our ability to build our influence. Now, in my former life as a corporate lobbyist and also as a communications expert for some 3 decades, I've advocated for and against many controversial policy objectives, and passions can often run high and emotions can easily bubble over, especially when the issue is something that you care deeply about. So the thoughts I wanted to share this week are applicable whether you're in the political arena or maybe in a high-stakes meeting and you're trying to defend a project that you've worked really hard on. I think a really good way to think about the use of emotion is to think of it like table salt. A little bit of it can enhance a dish, it can add depth and flavor, but too much can ruin it entirely. It's often that fine line both in the kitchen and out in the world. So with that thought in mind, let me share a few best practices that have worked really well for me. First, though, let me set the stage. Imagine that you are in a high-stakes meeting and you're presenting on a proposal or maybe defending a position that you have poured your heart and soul into, literally. Suddenly, a colleague challenges your data or your sort of underlying premise. You feel the heat rising up in your chest. Your heart begins to beat faster. Cortisol may start to course into your brain. And before you know it, you snap back. Your voice trembles, and you say something that you will inevitably regret. Maybe it's a less than well thought through response, or just a knee-jerk reaction to whatever the person says. Regardless, you say something that you wish you could hit the rewind button on and take it back. Now, another scenario, or let's say it's maybe more of a social setting. You're in a conversation and it inevitably turns to politics. The person lays out a position that you vehemently disagree with, and your blood pressure starts to rise, and all you want to say to the person is, "You are an idiot." We've all been there. Am I right? But that's not likely the best response, even if the person may in fact be an idiot. Before I run through a few ways to stop that reaction, let's talk about what happens in our brains during these moments. Something experts call an amygdala hijack. It is a primal response that bypasses our rational thinking and plunges us right into fight or flight mode. It can act in some ways maybe like a runaway train, derailing our logic and leaving us vulnerable to impulsive reactions that might not be the most effective or the most productive response. Or even worse, it might trigger a response that we will later likely regret. And let's be honest, women can suffer disproportionately when this happens. We can get labeled as overly emotional or irrational or ill-prepared, and this is especially true if you happen to be working primarily with men. When we as women get triggered and we react with emotion, a particular physical reaction can also often occur. The pitch of our voice can tend to rise, and that can send an audible message that we have lost control or we are unsure of our facts or our data, regardless of whether that's true or not. That physical, audible reaction, when challenged, can send the message that we weren't prepared to defend our position. So, how can we get control of our emotions so that we are building more influence versus running the risk of losing the influence that we've already built? Okay, I'm going to run through a few key tips. First, it's important to keep in mind that there are a number of factors that can impact how quickly we can become provoked. Obviously, stress, being overly tired, not getting enough exercise, not getting enough sleep, hormone fluctuations, the list goes on and on. Clearly, there are a lot of factors here that come into play. So the first thing is self-awareness. Pay really close attention to how you feel going into these situations, and try to be acutely aware of the potential combustible mix of both physical and emotionally triggering symptoms. Second, prepare in advance. Prepare for the potential contrarian views coming from others that could leave you triggered. If it's a presentation or you're presenting your point of view before a potential adversary, try to figure out what that person or those people's point of view is in advance and think about ways to diffuse or respond using your data to counter their points. Also, since you can't always prepare for every single scenario or question that you might get, practice taking their points of view as data or feedback and saying that you'll get back to them. Now, obviously, you should try to do this sparingly, but it can be an effective way of showing the person that you hear them, which can keep the challenge from continuing to escalate and can give you an opportunity to take a pause and actually reflect. The more aware and prepared that you are for what your vulnerabilities might be, the better prepared you can be with coping mechanisms to then help you manage your reaction. Another tool, which I just mentioned actually, is the power of pause. When you feel those emotions rising, take a deep breath to create some space between the stimulus and your response. The pause, even if it's just for a few seconds, can actually interrupt that amygdala hijack going on in your brain and can give your rational brain a chance to catch up. I also think a great tip is to just grab a drink of water. And if you have a glass nearby, if you don't, you should have a glass of water nearby. It can give you a few seconds to quickly process while your challenger is waiting for your response. You can think of it like hitting the pause button on a movie to give you time to assess the situation before reacting. Another great tool involves reframing the narrative. If you have a tendency to maybe personalize challenges, this can be especially helpful. Look for alternative explanations for why the person or adversary might be challenging you, and try to focus your efforts and your response more on solutions. Assume that the person is being constructive, even if you are pretty sure that he or maybe she is out to get you. He or she might be, but your reaction will likely be more effective, and you will build more credibility when you take the high road and cast yourself as the constructive, collaborative problem solver. Back to my example of thinking about emotion like salt. Remember that, especially for women, there can be an impression that emotion doesn't convey competence. It's not fair, but that potential does exist. The woman who expresses emotion too intensely can risk being seen as overly emotional or even irrational. And this perception can undermine her competence, making it harder for her ideas to be taken seriously. Her expertise can get overshadowed by her emotional display. Now, I realize this may not be a popular opinion these days, but it's just something to keep in mind. Again, you have to judge how to react in these situations for yourself. I'm just providing these suggestions because they are things that have worked incredibly well for me. I'm also not suggesting that you not feel the way that you feel, but instead be very aware of how and when you express what you feel. Not every single situation is created equal. It doesn't make you less authentic to not react in the moment, but it most certainly does impact your influence and how competent and how confident you ultimately appear when you use emotion in ways that can leave the impression that you are less credible than you actually are. Again, you have to be your own best judge for this, and getting outside input from trusted allies and from mentors, if you're struggling with this, can be especially helpful here. It's something I've seen over and over again, both in using emotion really effectively and often sparingly, and in using it less effectively, and how that can impact the tone of a conversation and a negotiation. So, friend, let me share a few other quick tips that I think are important. If it's a speech or a presentation that you're getting ready to give, try to get a read of the room as quickly as possible when you arrive. If you don't know the participants in advance and you have a few minutes before the meeting starts, go around the room and introduce yourself to as many folks as you can. Try to find out a little bit about them, which can be incredibly important data so that you can calibrate your presentation. Essentially, pay attention to the emotional tone of the environment and adjust your approach as you need to. The more you know in advance about who will be in the room and what predisposed notions they may have, the better prepared you will be to know what's coming. The more you can practice reacting in ways that enable you to keep the conversation moving along, the better you'll come across. Second tip is know your material. That may seem pretty obvious, but by knowing your material, I also mean be aware of potential weaknesses in your arguments and be ready to respond to those. The more you think about the ways that you might be caught off guard and actually prepare for those potential moments, the better. And it can be really helpful to get help practicing this and getting input from others. On the topic of authenticity, be authentic, but be strategic. Don't be afraid to express emotion, but remember, do so in ways that align with your bigger goals and your objectives. When we think more about the long term and how a quick, ill-fated emotional response might impact future opportunities or the life of our project or idea, that too can help you gain perspective that can help you manage those emotions in the moment. Maybe ask yourself, will providing a quippy response now actually help me move the ball and improve my overall chances of success? Do I care? Am I willing to allow this project to crash and burn over this one comment? How might my quick response impact my overall influence? Those are just a few really good questions to ask yourself, ideally before you find yourself triggered. Also, if you tend to deal with imposter syndrome, as many of us do, build in some affirmations as you prepare prior to the presentation or the meeting. You can check out last week's episode for a few quick tips on why affirmations work and how to make them most effective. They're important in this situation because they can be a helpful boost to your confidence. And when you feel more confident, you're also likely to be better prepared when challenged. Friend, I have always found that the more I understand where the other person's coming from, the better prepared I'll be to respond in a way that not only protects the influence that I built, but also helps me to add to it. And while I can't prepare for every single possibility, I can prepare for many of them, which means I'll also likely be more prepared for those that I hadn't considered. So, friend, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic and any challenges that you've been having in terms of getting the balance right between emotion and passion and authenticity and credibility. I would really love to hear. You can send me some feedback or a question at info@shesaid.media, or you can join me on social media. I would love for you to follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn, where you'll find more content like this and where we can communicate more directly. In the meantime, have a great rest of your week. And remember, She Said podcast is a weekly production of She Said Media. Take care.